Okay, Shalom Aleichem, everybody. As I said before, today we're starting Siman Tzadik Aleph. Siman Tzadik Aleph is the meat and potatoes of Basar B'Cholov. Till now, we spoke about general ideas of what's meat and what's milk, how far you got to separate the two by time, by not having the same table. Now we start talking about problems. Let me start doing headlines here. These, what I put on my chart over here, I believe will help you, guide you through not only Siman Tzadik Aleph, but will help you analyze situations throughout the rest of Basar B'Cholov. And these rules will apply throughout the Hilchos Ta'aruvos. Now, in Basar B'Cholov, primarily our issue is Basar Ugvina. Primarily our issue is where meat comes in contact with cheese or milk. That's the prohibition that we talk about. Basar in contact with gvina, with cholov. The same question could be more general or possibly more common. Heter coming in contact with isser. Heter meaning to say something, a permissible food, something that you're allowed to have, coming in contact with something you're not allowed to have. Now, the form of contact they combine will be in many different ways. For an isser to be created, to change over the status of something which is kosher, edible, allowed to be eaten, because it's fruit or it's milchig, and now you want to call it isser, because it came in contact with something which was asser, has different forms of ways how it can happen. Okay, so first of all, I have to generalize that by us we talk about in general issues of basar coming in contact with gvina or gvina coming in contact with basar. The same discussion will be many, many, many times in Shulchan Aruch starting from now on, all the way throughout Hilchos Ta'aruvos, where it's not basar and gvina, rather it's heter and isser. A food that you're allowed to have, possibly becoming usher because it came in contact with isser. Okay, that's number one. Number two, the form of contact that we have an issue with, if a piece of kosher meat just touches non-kosher, what's the problem? Why are you worried about to separate them? If it only touched in the fridge, okay, separate them. And what's there to worry about? Why do you believe that the non-kosher extracted its taste and spit it into the kosher? There has to be some kind of form of heat for that to do. For that to happen, that isser is all isser. I should give out of my taste into you, I meaning the heter, or I meaning the isser, or I meaning the basar, or the gvina, to my taste to spit into you, that will take heat. Without just by touching that doesn't happen. Okay? So therefore, this could be done primarily. All problems become if it was cham. If one of the two, this was cham, or this was cham, or this was cham. Cham meaning hot, heat. When there is heat, due to whatever circumstance, as we will soon see, heat generates the transfer of taste. How does the heat generate transfer of taste? There are different levels. We learned a little of it already. There is the level of bishul. When a food is cooked up, there's a lot of heat taking place. And when the food is being cooked together, for example, take the case of basar and gvina. If they were being bishul, if they were being mevushal together, then there's no chance that some of the basar taste did not go into the gvina, or some of the gvina taste did not go into the basar. That's what cooking does. If you want to have a garlicky taste, or a certain taste in your soup, you don't go and spice every piece of whatever's in the soup to make sure it gets the taste. You put some of it in the pot, And the cooking is what we call in Shulchan Aruch, the reitiv, the sauce, the liquid, the bubbling of the fire makes the taste mifafeya, circle and get around everywhere. So whenever there is bishul, whenever there is cooking, then the cooking is mifafeya, the taste. It schleps around all tastes from there into everything. Who's this? Yes, Dr. Don?
Are you separating cooking with a hot and mild cooking, like boiling? Or it sounds like you're speaking about two different things, or is it just one?
I am going to separate it two. I'm going to separate it two because, first of all, I want to tell you there's cham and there's tzainin. Cham means hot, tzaina means cold. But before I tell you, because after all, I could tell you a case where this basar and gvina came in contact a certain way, and they're not being cooked together, yet they're hot. How? I'll tell you. I'll give you an example. They're out of the pot. It's out of the pot. The steak is out of the pan. It's completely out of the pan. It's on my plate on the table. And now somebody or somehow it came in contact with cheese. So it is cham, it is hot because it was cooked, but it's not when it's being bishul, mivushal together. That's the ultimate circumstance of where definitely problems have taken place. If it's in the same pot, on the fire together, that's for sure a problem. But that's the worst scenario because the fire and the reitiv and the sauce and the liquid that takes place during cooking schleps around taste everywhere. So if you ask me if there was a pound of cheese or a glass of milk falls into a pot of meat, and you want to know, and the pot is on the fire, you want to know if the milk went everywhere? For sure the milk went everywhere. You know why? Because if it falls into the reitiv, if it falls into the sauce, and it's on the fire, then the sauce drags it all around. It doesn't stay central in one location. That's a general idea that you'll have to learn Simon Tzadik Beis, but we are not even talking about that case where it fell into the pot as it's in the fire. We're talking about pieces of meat or pieces of cheese that are hot because they were on the fire. They are hot now, but they're off the fire, and they're touching. Cham, something which is hot. A food item which is hot, anything that will come in contact with it will be able to absorb some of the taste of the hot food. So let's not use basar and gvina. Let's use a piece of meat, hot piece of meat, and you put some carrot over it. In theory, based on this logic, the carrot, if it stays there long enough and it touches the hot meat, the carrot should feel a little fleshig, should feel a little taste, because the heat of the steak allow that its taste should go into another type of food. Now, if it goes into a carrot, it's not a big problem. The problem is, it wasn't a carrot. It was cheese. It was milk. So, if basar and gvina come in contact, the problem is primarily if it was cham, if they were hot. Now, as I tell you now, basar and gvina coming in contact, the same issue will be heter and isser coming in contact. Heter and isser means to say kosher meat, non-kosher meat. There's somehow in your house or somebody near you had a hot pork sandwich, and that hot pork sandwich was placed on a kosher counter or on a kosher plate. Does it make the kosher plate non-kosher? Because it generates heat and it spits out its taste in the kosher plate. But without heat, when things are tzainin, there is no mamoshus. There's no tangible taste. There's no taste being passed on. There might be something else. But taste does not extract and go into another piece when it's not hot. Now, Yitzchak's question, what degree is hot? typically we say degree of yad letters boy. If the food is hot enough that it's yad letters boy, then it will suit out its taste to whatever it comes in contact with. Okay? So with that in mind, let's simplify it. That is what yad letters boy means. With the hand, it's so hot that if you put your hand on it, your hand will jump up. Okay? It's not comfortable to hold. It's too hot. Okay. Now, so if we were to stop here, Beryl, without the share's over. The share's over, and I ask you, Beryl, accidentally, milk and meat and cheese came in contact in your fridge. What would you say, Beryl?
If it's cold, there is not a problem. We can discuss other issues, but if both are cold, and the other thing I remember was if there is something wet or not. We have to know if it's something that is it's just cold.
Where did we learn that already?
No, just if we finish now, it's just the temperature is the only condition.
So in your refrigerator, could you have milk, meat, and cheese in the same touching each other in the fridge?
So far, yes.
So far, yes. Now I have to make something very, very clear, and this is a good loophole to keep in mind, and that is most of the times the issues by us today's days is not like the original issues that there was in the times of the Shulchan Aruch, where the actual meat touched the actual gevina, the actual cheese. Today's days, nobody puts a piece of cheese in the fridge without a plate, without a bowl, without a pot, and nobody puts a piece of chicken that way. So most of the times, what it's touching is already an offshoot of the problem, which we will get there to see does that help us or not. So if we would stop here, according to Rabbi Dr. Beryl Kramer, the din would be nothing. It's cold. The nuclear reaction of basar not touching gvina is not a big problem because it's only when it transfers taste. True, Beryl, you're true. But so issue is cold, dry versus hot, wet. I didn't say a word about dry and wet. I said about cold and hot. I said right now cold and hot. I did not open the floor. I did not open yet the floor for dry and wet, but it's on my chart. Lach and yavish. Lach would be moisture, liquidy, and yavish would be dry. Okay, he discussed it, so I'll tell you what the logic is there. When something is dry, there's even another reason why it's not allowing its taste to go in. It's a dried thing. It's dried out. If it's dried out, it's almost not giving its taste out completely. Throw the logic. A dry, cold thing? What do you think? It's ever going to shoot out its taste? For example, the example which is discussed in this very long shach, a cold matzah. A cold matzah in a chametzik keli. The kelis are you're looking for a dish to put your matzah in. The dish is empty, clean. Obviously, it's not hot, as is right now. And your matzah is dry, because the matzah doesn't have any liquid, and it's also cold. Beryl, what should be the din? Should you be able to, on Pesach, you have nowhere else to put your matzah, should you be able to put your matzah in a Pesach, in a chametzik pot, chametzik plate? Beryl?
If it's just, if it's not crumbs, I would say it's not a problem.
Okay. So, Dr. Dahan, that's why Yavish, dry means like we said earlier, dry like dry wood, or basically dry. Doesn't have to be mamish dry wood. A matzah is considered yavish. The shach uses that example of a matzah. What's the chesar and what's the downside of a davar lach? A davar lach, a moist thing, something that has a little liquid. There's a little more chance that it's going to extract or inhale, take in some other taste more. So you have to divide the general questions that will come about when you have two foods touching, either milk and meat or heter and isser. It's actually divided like this. You're going to have to know tzoynein cham. Is it cold or hot? Was it lach or was it yavish? Is it a liquid thing? Are one of the two foods liquidy, moist, or are they both yavish? And then, with that in mind, you could even see, is the problem a minimal problem, something very small, or the problem becomes worse and worse. For example, let's take the two extremes. A davar tzoynein yavish is the right extreme. A davar lach cham is the other extreme, because tzoynein doesn't spit out its taste, and yavish doesn't spit out its taste. Cham spits out its taste, and even lach, even if it's not cham, spits out its taste. So those are the two extremes. David Natan, do I have you? Do you understand what's going on? You give me the thumbs up? Okay, fine. Now, so, does not hot, cold, temp, wet, dry? Does hot, cold, trump, wet, dry? That's going to be the discussion. Baruch Noam. I would like to. You see, there's a taz. Actually, it's a shach gimel. You see shach gimel? Give a look at that shach gimel. See where it starts and where it finishes, and get back to me when you know that shach, please. Shach gimel. That's the shach that talks about all this. What is worse? Which, like you're asking, what trumps what? Does the lach and yavish main the issue, or tzoynein and cham? That's going to be part of that conversation. All right. So now, the problem became because basar touched kvina or heter touched isser, and all of us are asked the question, Rabbi, what should we do? A piece of meat touched my cheese. Somebody asked a question, why he uses kvina and that's cholov. That's part of the conversation too. And in a second, you'll see in Siv Beis, he doesn't only switch from basar touching gvina, he switches into basar touching a kli shel isser. He goes to a real far out case, and there's a reason for that too. All right, so let's that's a big shach, Baruch Noam writes. That's right, but it's a geschmacka one. You could be sure, David, that shach there's going to be a lot of screaming from my end. Don't worry, it's a geschmacka one. So let's get down to how we solve the problems. So to solve the problem, like a chart of what our options could be when isser touches heter, or when basar touches gvina, these are 5 options. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There are 5 options. Sometimes we will say that when basar touches gvina or heter touches isser, all you need is hadacha. All you need is rinse it off, wash it off. You don't need more than rinsing. You don't need more than washing off the place it touched. Sometimes you will say it's a little more than just the surface that the problem is. The problem went in a little into the food, but it didn't aser. The problem did not aser all the food because it was not hot enough to inhale, to intake the taste completely to this in totality, in its own piece, its whole piece. It only affected a Clippa. A Clippa means a layer. It only affected the outer layer. I'm going to explain all this in a second. Sometimes we say netila. Clippa means an outer layer. Netila means take off a part more than our outer layer, it's actually discussed in Shulchan Aruch that Netila is Oivi Etzba, the width of a finger. Clippa is just a layer. Netila is more than a layer. It's a more tangible part that you got to take off. Sometimes you say, whoa, this thing absorbs so much of the taste of the Isser, it's Kulei Usser. Forget about it. It's Usser. Might as well put it in the garbage. And sometimes you say, listen, it might be Usser, it might not be Usser, and let's see how far the problem went. And the Isser could become Bato B'Shishim. Bato B'Shishim means to say, if it's diluted with 60 times the amount against it that of kosher food, then we'll ignore it. It becomes Bato. These are 5 options you will find. You might find 1 or 2 more options if you remember from before. Sometimes you say, Davar afilu be'elef loy bato. Sometimes you say it's Asher b'mashu. But in general, these are the most common ones. Now, I will tell you what the most common ones will be and how they get categorized. Usually, to know when you use one of these rules, it will all depend on soinen or cham. It will all depend how serious did this contact create? What problem did the contact create? Meaning to say, when basar or gvina touch, just by touching doesn't make it basar v'chalav. It only becomes the issue of basar v'chalav when each one absorbs some opposite taste. And for that to happen, there has to be some heat. There has to be so when there is a minimal amount of heat, then it only affects the Clippa. When there's more heat, it affects more than Clippa. It affects the whole piece. If there is no heat whatsoever, then you're right. The taste did not go in. And you're right that it didn't even affect the outer layer. But just by the fact that it came in contact, the grease from the meat went onto the cheese, not the taste. The taste did not push in, because for the taste to push in, it has to be heat. But by coming in contact and it's greasy food, then you put 2 foods together, and there's always some leftovers from the other food, the shamnunis, the grease, the leftovers, and that will be enough if you just rinse it. So to answer now Beryl's question, the question I asked Beryl. So if milk and meat, milk and cheese are come in contact, not by pots, they literally touch the milk and meat. So you are right. If they touch in the refrigerator, there was no heat to generate that they should pass on the taste to each other. But the other problem is still there. Being that they touched, they passed on some of its grease, some of its shamnunis. And to get rid of that, all you got to do is hadacha. So what you do is separate the two, rinse off the piece of meat, rinse off the cheese, and that's gesundheit. There's no problem, because they did not pass on its taste. So basar or gvina, if they came in contact with tzainin, if they were both, remember when I say tzainin means they were both tzainin, then it's a small problem. And because it's a small problem, there is a problem, but it's small, and get rid of that issue, all you got to do is hadacha. That's fine. You're questioning my authority? What do you mean by that?
No,
what
questioning.
I don't mean that. I'm saying, what do you mean by that?
So that's it. In other words, if it's cold, no matter what happens, no matter where, all you have to do is hadacha and we're done? Or is that always the case?
It doesn't. Sometimes you can't make hadacha. You know how you can't make hadacha? If milk, if it wasn't gvina, if it was milk that came in contact with the basar, how are you going to make hadacha on the milk? So that's the separate question. That will be the question. How serious is this hadacha? It did not shoot and taste, right? But to get rid of the shamnunis, we want you to do the hadacha. Is it that serious that if you didn't do it, you just messed up the keli, you messed up the issue, and if you can't do it, it's garbage? Or hadacha is just a buffer zone? That is going to be part of the conversation. Okay? Number one. The next level, okay, let me get some checks. Did everybody get when hadacha kicks in? Please give me a check, and you understand the logic. Rabbi Yitzchak, how about, I see you coming, you're a Yotze B'Nichnas. Yotze B'Nichnas is a good mashgiach. Everybody's afraid of my Yotze B'Nichnas. Rabbi Yitzchak, do you get the hadacha? Okay, I don't know if I have you. Okay. Let's go to the next one, Clippa. Clippa is a very famous word in Chassidus, but over here is not what we call, what we use Clippa for. Clippa means a shell, a layer, or outer layer. When would you believe that basar or gvina come in contact, or heter and isser come in contact, and it only gave its taste into the other piece? Only to the outer layer. But it did not shoot in its taste all the way through. So the first thing you should say, if the heat, it was taka hot, because without heat, it doesn't shoot out its taste. But it was a minimal amount of heat. How does that work? So let me tell you the rule. The rule is like this. A very, very important rule. The rule is that malicha and kavush also generates heat. What do you mean malicha and kavush generates heat? When you salt a food, and you put a lot of salt on a piece of food, and that will be in sif hay, there will be a whole discussion how much salt and for how long. But if you the bottom line is herring is very salted. It will be considered a davar reiteach. If you sometimes you preserve food, you put a lot of salt. We had it earlier. Remember we had it earlier? We had it by Cholav and Nimtze Bekeva over there. Remember that the Shach and Taz over there? We had it in Siman Pei Zayin. So malicha, a food which is salted with a proper amount and a proper long time, halachically, minat Torah, it's not considered very hot. But the Rabbanim considered it hot. That's why I put it in the middle of the chart, because usually maliach would be considered reiteach, would be considered cham mid Rabbanan, but sometimes we use it as a term of tzainin. It creates an isser b'tzainin. What do I mean? Let me explain. Somebody salted pig. Somebody salted pork in a pot. All he did, he didn't cook the pig in the pot. He salted the pig in the pot. Okay, he used a lot of salt. Nobody's going to eat the pig because this pig's not kosher. The question is, did this pot absorb non-kosher? So if the pot was used to cook the pig, there wouldn't be a shaila. By the heat of the bishul, obviously the taste of the pork went into the pot. But over here, it was a much less temperature. It was a temperature that only due to malicha. Or he was pickling that pork, and he soaked it there for 24 hours. It also does some kind of work, but it's definitely not as bad as cooking. So the Rabbanan come along and say, maliach kireiteach. So we know these rules from earlier, right? Something salted is considered hot, and kavush kamavushal, something which is soaking, is considered cooked, and we consider that hot, right? So the truth is, I should really take out the word kavush, because maliach says, the word by maliach is kamavushal. Maliach, is kireiteach. The word maliach is kireiteach. But the word kavush is kamavushal. It's a different ball game. And it's not fair to mix the two, because there's a big, big, big difference. Okay, so let's talk about one of these foods, either the basar or the gvina, the heter or the isser. They were not hot because they were cooked, but they were hot because they were maliach. You have a salted piece of cheese, a very salted piece of cheese. Okay? That's the temperature level of the cheese. And a piece of meat touches it. David Natan. What would future Rabbi David Natan say?
Saying if the cheese was malicha and meat touches it,
yes,
then it would probably.
In other words, David, that's the only level of temperature that's circulating here between the two pieces. The meat is cold, the cheese is salted. Or let's move it over to heter v'isser. The heter is cold and the isser is salted. Or the isser is cold and the heter is salted. That's the only level of temperature that's floating around, is one of the two foods are hot due to the fact that it's salted.
Probably be it would affect the outer layer of the cheese, or I guess of either one. It would affect the outer layer, so you could cut it off and use the inside.
Okay, you're smart, because you said either one only applies over here, right? Either one does not apply over here. Because in the bottom case, the isser you're not going to eat anyways. Okay, very good. By a basar and gvina, you're saying. So let me explain what you just said. Is hadacha good enough, David? Would hadacha satisfy you?
No.
Why not?
Because the fact that it's salted, it means it's gonna impact. If the meat touches salted cheese, the salt's gonna impact the meat as well. And you can't just rinse it off. It actually chemically changes the meat.
Bingo. Very good. Very good. Now, due to the fact that there's not a lot of heat, it will only affect kidei Clippa. It will only affect kidei Clippa. So now, we have hadacha, clear. Hadacha is when everything is shining. And we should have Clippa clear. Clippa is where there is heat, but it's not very hot. It was not hot because it was cooked. It was boiling. It's only hot because it was maliach. Then we say Clippa. Yitzchak, are you with me? I want to tell you something, a geschmacka thing. Give me a check if you're with me, because I want to add something here that will. Please, in a couple of weeks from now, when we get to this sif later in Shulchan Aruch, you'll look back to this chart, you'll understand what it is. Yitzchak, are you with me? Would that mean that warm meat from cooking would be kidei Clippa? Warm meat from cooking is no such thing as warm meat. If it's not yatzei ledes boy, it's cold. If it is yatzei ledes boy, then it's bishul. There's no such thing as warm does nothing. Malicha is worse than warm meat. Lukewarm is not a problem. Okay. So let me tell you an issue with this kidei Clippa. An issue with this kidei Clippa. A very practical issue. I think we mentioned it once before. The issue with kidei Clippa is like this. How is it possible that you believe that here there's a piece of food, and only the outer layer has a certain taste, and inside did not absorb that taste? It's because there's nothing in this piece that's going to schlep around the outer taste. But what if this piece, we had it already once before. What if this piece was a davar shamein, a very fatty type of food? When something is a davar shamein, you remember I gave you the example that if you pour oil on a piece of paper, even though it's poured on this side of the paper, you'll touch the other end of the paper will feel greasy. Because a fatty liquid, a fatty type of ingredient is mifafeya. It drags itself around. So here, the very fact that you believe that the taste only went in kedei Clippa, but not more, that will only apply by not a fatty food. When this food that absorbed the taste was fatty, whatever taste it absorbed, then the piece itself works within it and schleps everything in and around. So a davar shamein, a fatty food, will take what originally was only a problem kedei Clippa and schlep it into everywhere. So therefore, the mechaber keeps on telling you that whenever there's an issue of minalicha, you always do kedei Clippa, because Clippa is as far as it gets. Right? I'm answering your question, David Ber Kramer. The Ramah comes along and says, you will agree to me that by a davar shamein, Clippa is not enough. Are you going to be able to tell me what exactly is a davar shamein and what exactly is a davar not shamein? You can't tell me, right? And therefore, there is no such a din of kedei Clippa, because it could work when it's not shamein. But I don't know where to draw the line between a davar is shamein or not. So the Ramah always says, listen to how far that goes, that even though the temperature heat was a heat much less than bishul, it was a heat of malicha, in theory it should only affect kedei Clippa, but because there are some circumstances where Clippa will extend further into the whole piece, and that is when it's a fatty piece, and we don't know what's considered a fatty piece. By all issues of malicha, we say you need shishim. No more kedei Clippa. You need shishim. Does everybody understand that? That's really so. What I have to do right now, is put this kedei Clippa in a big question, in a big circle, because Clippa will not exist. It's not an option according to everybody. It's only an option according to the Rabbana, according to the Mechaber. The Ramah later on says that Clippa is not an option because since there are some cases where the Clippa will extend its taste everywhere, and we don't know when that option starts and when that option goes, and so we always have to ignore kedei Clippa. We have to make it as if the whole thing became usher. All right. Dr. Dahan, I got you. Everybody's barrel. Baruch Noam, you're quiet. Fine? Everybody's fine? Yitzchak, you got what I said about kedei Clippa? All right. Now, let me tell you something that we figure out later on from the Chazal, later on from the Shulchan Aruch. We're up to down to Netila. I think I figured out a technical difference between a food which was cooked or a food which was roasted. When you cook food in water, you boil it up in water, and you boil it up long enough, every part of the food, the longer you cook, the softer every part of the food becomes. So it's in the kishkis. The whole thing is becoming part and parcel of the cooking. The taste is everywhere. If you slice up a big steak, the middle part will taste will have all the spice taste that the outer part had, right? That happens more by bishul than it even happens by tzli. Roasting sort of centralizes its heat. It schleps, it sucks out very nicely the dam, the blood, better than salting, right? That we'll know that from Hilchos Melicha. But if you look, most of the time, roast, the outer part is verbrennt, crispy, and the inner part doesn't do its job that well. It starts, by the time it hits the inner part, it's becoming dried out. It's actually drying it out, right? So now, if there is a food which was roasted, take two foods. Here there's a food, I'll take two different color things there. I don't know if you're able to see these colors over the video. Are you able to see colors? No, right? We should make it more obvious. Give me a second, please. Here there's a pink. You see the colors? Here there's two foods. One pink, one yellow. The pink, they're both pieces of meat. They're both pieces of meat. They're both pieces of meat. This one, the pink one, the one on my right, was roasted, and it's on my plate now. And the left one was cooked, and it's my plate now. Two separate pieces of meat. Two plates. One has a roasted piece of meat, and one has a cooked piece of meat. They're both hot now. And I have a choice. Should I eat my roasted chicken, or should I eat my cooked chicken? They're both boiling hot. What is the logic? Baruch Noam, I would like to get you involved. Tell me if there would be a difference if a piece of cheese, cold, touches the roasted chicken, to if a piece of cheese, cold, touches the cooked chicken. Could you see a difference? Are you able to talk there, or your nephew is sleeping?
Either way, it's I guess it'd be an issue of one's derived and one's rabbanan. No, you said it's chicken.
Why is the rabbanan? Why is the rabbanan?
I was thinking you said meat and chicken, but you said roasted
meat.
And
no, two pieces of meat.
Of the meat.
Two pieces of meat. Do you, based on the theory that I used before, during the process of roasting and during the process of cooking, I could understand that roasting is much hotter. But take the food off the rotisserie, off the roasting machine, and take the food out of the pot and put them in plates, separate plates. Do you think that whatever comes in contact with A and what comes in contact with B will be a different level?
Right now, I would say no, because either way, if they're both at a level that you can't touch it, then it would have the same damage. It's both meat. It's both God say let us buy. So that shouldn't make a difference unless there's an issue with the ingredients inside. Okay.
So let me tell you, I'm not going to elaborate this too much, but I will tell you that natila is usually used by sli. Something which is hot due to roasting only affects kedei natila, which is more than kedei Clippa. Now, don't question the halacha right now, because it's. You're saying it's yatzei leathers boy, but the yatzei leathers boy of a bishul is much stronger than the yatzei leathers boy of a tzli. So, if something comes in contact with a roasted piece of food, whatever taste that roasted piece of food will have, it will shoot into the piece of food that came in contact with it up to kedei natila. Okay? And yes.
I'm sorry, it's a simple question, but what's the difference between roasting and cooking and temperature? When you roast, is it higher, you're saying? I'm not.
No.
When you roast,
I'm
when you roast something.
Right now on your plate, they're both hot. The right plate has roasted chicken, it's yatzei leathers boy, and the left plate has cooked chicken, it's yatzei leathers boy. But something that comes in contact with a cooked piece of food will absorb more of that taste than something that comes in contact with a roasted piece of food. Roast dries things up. Cooking moists things up. And the fact that it was cooked, it will shoot out its taste more into what it comes in contact with.
But when you cook something, does it take longer as when you roast something?
Yes, but it doesn't make a difference now.
And roasting, is it at a higher temperature than it's cooking, or that also doesn't matter?
Doesn't make a difference. Right now, they're both same temperature, but this one's due to it became hot from roasting, and this one it became hot from cooking. When you roast something, the temperature is central. It dries things out and it stays right here. when you cook something, the whole thing is bubbling, the whole thing is involved. Okay, I mean, the roasting part, the chili part needs more learning, and let's leave the natila parts for much later. The most common case is none of what we spoke about till now. Most of the questions that you're going to have in your house or hashgacha companies have in their hashgacha is not issues of Gedei Clippa, because for two reasons not issues of Gedei Clippa. First of all, most of the issues are not due to heat of salt, and now most of the issues are not in the heat of tzli. It's usually something hot. It was cooked, came in contact, something cold, or something hot that was cooked, came in contact with something else hot that was cooked. So we, in general, have issues of bishul. If something is hot, something is cham, because it was mevushal, it was cooked, that something is one of these four. Either it was hot cheese, hot meat, hot kosher food, hot isser food. If it's any one of these four, whatever comes in contact with it will inhale, will absorb some of that taste. How much? Everything. How much? It depends how much the taste it was. Okay? Now this is if it's out of the pot. This is if it's out of the pot. It's not when the basar or gvina are in a pot together, being cooked. That's the extreme case. After all I told you right now, that seems to be very obvious. So, David Natan, please tell me, based on everything you learned right now, please tell me what would be the din if somebody's cooking up a steak and accidentally somebody pours in a white sauce. He thought it's a white sauce, a mushroom sauce, but it turns out to be milk sauce. How would you paskin? What happens to the steak? What happens to the milk? What happens to the pot?
My inclination is that it would all be isser. It might depend on whether or not you have shishim, but if you had shishim, if you had 1/60th the amount of sauce than the steak, the sauce for sure would not be good, but you might be able to save the steak. But if you don't have shishim, it'd all be isser.
Tell me, how are you going to get rid of the sauce? You know, could you point to the sauce and say, "Oh, I got it"? What do you mean?
Well,
how are you going to get the sauce
if it's
out?
Shishim, I mean, it doesn't matter. You can't get it out, but it's bittul.
Okay. And what if it's not shishim?
Then it's kulo es aser.
Very good. So you might as well get Smicha ready. You're a done deal. You want to close the book already, or you want to learn? Okay. Okay. There's one last thing you should know. But again, this is something that I'm not going to discuss now because there's a whole siman of Shulchan Aruch. Dr. Behan, you want to say something? There's a whole siman of Shulchan Aruch that we'll talk about it later, and that is some rules become different when it's a davar charif. When the food is sharp, hot, spicy food generates heat without cooking heat. Just like the Rabbana came along and said malicha generates heat, you don't have to be an Einstein to know that jalapenos and spicy food like that generates heat. So sometimes a davar charif, so Beryl, pay attention there. A tzoiling davar charif might be considered cham. So if you have, I think there's something peppery jack, cheese, something jalapeno cheese. If you would have jalapeno cheese cold from the fridge, if that would be, and it came in contact with meat, that'd be due to the fact that it had a davar, there's spices in there. Again, you have to learn later on tzadik hey, tzadik vov, to know what's considered a davar charif. Not a little sprinkle of lemon will make the food davar charif. But If it will fall into a category of davar charif, that's another level of heat that spits out its taste. Okay? But that right now we're going to learn very little of it.
If in case
okay, now boys, sorry. Yes.
You consider davar charif like melicha, so we can solve the problem with Clippa?
Good question. Good question. Don't, as of right now, that's fine. Well, let me ask you. Which generates more heat? Melicha, davar charif, or bishul?
Bishul, then davar charif, then melicha.
So what would you say for davar charif?
I think with common sense, but maybe the halacha is not exactly how I think. So I think davar charif is closer to melicha than to cook.
Okay. Some of it we'll get to right now. Okay, now boys say let's look inside right now. Actually, today's whole shiur till now is all about peh. But it's an introduction. I think this introduction might have sounded a little boring till now, but it's going to come and it's going to help you a lot to understand the general pair of glasses you got to use when you learn these halachas. Seif Aleph. Siman Tzadik Aleph, Seif Aleph. Beryl, before I begin, I want to tell you that it was yesterday I recorded the whole Siman Tzadik Aleph on tape, and he's supposed to put it on tonight. So within the next couple of days, I don't know if he's putting it on the website, but within the next day or so, it should be on the website, the whole Siman Tzadik Aleph. Yes.
Hey, really quickly, what's Sheni's Arvo?
Shenis Arvu, they were mixed together. Headline, Siman Tzadik Aleph is Din, Basar v'chalav, meat and milk, Shenis Arvu. Meat and milk that came in contact with each other, they were mixed together. Ta'arubis. Uboy ches seifim. And to discuss this, there's 8 chapters, 8 seifim, and Rabbi Say, I predict that we will spend close to a month on these 8 seifim, maybe even more, because we only have 2 shurim a week. Seif Aleph. Buster, by the way, does everybody see how this is where the fun and games start? This is where we start realizing how our kitchen issues and the hashgacha issues, this is it all. This is it. Meat and gvina, meat and cheese that touched each other, mutarim. You don't have to throw it in the garbage. You're allowed to eat it. But do me a favor, there's one thing you got to do before you eat it. Ella shetzarich lahadiach makom negiyasam. All you got to do is rinse, wash the place where the milk and meat touched. The milk and cheese touched, by the way. You realize why he switched to gvina is because milk can't be washed. So he's specifically talking about a case where hadacha could be a solution, where he wants hadacha to take place, and therefore he says that if meat and cheese touch, and they were both, obviously you got to fill in the blanks, they were both training, they were both cold, then there's only a problem of the outer shamnunis, then we say that all you got to do is rinse them. Now, to be honest with you, if you look in the Achrayim here, there is a question if you have to rinse, scrub, rub, how far you got to go. But if you take the word simply, the Mechaber says, the word is lahadiach, to rinse off. Aha! So all you got to do is wash them off. So my question to you is, could I put in my shopping bag cheese? Not with the way we have everything. We're spoiled Americans. Everything is wrapped by itself. But could you take a block of cheese, unwrapped, and put it in the same shopping bag as chicken, unwrapped? What are you shaking your head like this? They're both raw, both cold. So the Mechaber says, by the way, this is a Mishnah. This is a Mishnah in Chulin. says, umuter latzur oisam b'matpachas achas. You are allowed to wrap them together in one wrapping if they're not close enough to touch. But v'loich and v'loich hashinon, we are not afraid shema yigu zebazeh. In other words, to put them side by side and make them touch, we will see in Siv Beis that we don't want you to do. Because being that we expect you to wash it, we are afraid you might forget to wash it. That's going to be Siv Beis. In Sif Aleph, he says, if you're putting it in a situation where you're wrapping each one separately, you're putting it in the same bag, and then the chashish, should I be Superman from and say, maybe something's going to happen and the milk and cheese, the cheese and meat will touch? No. You're allowed to, mutter lotzer oisim b'matpachas achas, you're allowed to wrap them in the same wrapping, the same cloth, not touching. Well, don't be so worried that they might touch. Because after all, if they will touch, you'll wash it. That is Sif Aleph. Because Sif Aleph is talking about Basar v'chalav, which were tzainim, which were cold. Yes?
When he says he can put them in the same wrapping, does that mean... can you explain what that means? That they're not touching? They're wrapped separately, but they're in the same bag.
Yeah, or you have a cloth. Matpachas is actually a cloth, and the beginning of the cloth you wrap cheese, and as you're folding it down, you wrap the meat, the chicken.
And chayshinan means work.
Chayshinan, we're not worried. We don't worry. Shema yigus ebazeh. Maybe they will end up touching. Okay, that is. Now it's beautiful to learn this first, because Sif Aleph and Beis talk about the easy part, the easy way around. All you got to do is hadacha. Look at Shach Aleph. Shach Aleph. Shach Aleph says the Shach. All you got to do is rinse the place that it touched. Because of a Bach, says the Bach, you know what? There are some times you don't even have to rinse it. Why do you have to rinse it? Baruch Noam, why do you even have to rinse it? They're cold. Why are you rinsing it? Baruch Noam, why are you rinsing it when they're cold?
Any case, the shamunis.
Okay, so what does that mean? That here is a piece of cheese. It's a lebedik piece of cheese. And the piece of cheese has some grease outside. Here's a chicken. Chicken has some grease, and it will pass on. How about that the two types of food that are touching here are both yavashim? They're both dry. And the dry thing does not have shamnunis. You're right. If they're both dry in a circumstance like that, you wouldn't even have to wash it. You wouldn't even have to wash it. I'll call you later. Says the Bach, Shachem Aleph, the cost of a Bach, the Dafka, this will only apply Kishaechav Mehem Lach. If one of the two things, one of the two ingredients, one of the two foods in this case has a little moisture. Avolum Shneim Yavashim. But if both foods, the milk, the cheese, again, that's why he switches again to cheese. Milk is liquid. Milk is lach. The cheese is a dry cheese. And the chicken or the meat is dried out chicken. And they're both cold. Afilu hadacha ein tzarech. You wouldn't even have to wash it. Anybody have any issues with that? Does anybody have any issues with that? Huh?
So you're saying if you go shopping and you buy cheese and chicken, you can put them in the same bag and not have to worry about it?
We have much less chance to worry about it, because when you buy a chicken, you're not getting a chicken that's unwrapped. You're getting a chicken either in its bag or its wrapping or whatever. And the cheese is also in its own wrapping. So what should you worry? Maybe the wrapping of the chicken has a slash, and the wrapping of the cheese will have a slash. That's looking for ways to be worried. And even if they did have a slash, the worst that you'll need is wash it. You're going to wash the chicken anyways before you cook it. Okay, David, what do you want me to repeat? David.
Just that line of shach, I blinked for a second, sorry.
Beryl, teach him something. What did the shach just say?
We are speaking about that the meat and the cheese are cold. So what the shach is saying that this that we had to rinse just applied with one of them is wet. If both of them are dry, it's not necessary to rinse. We can use directly without even rinse.
David, comprende? Huh? David, got it?
What's the last hadacha aleph tzadik?
Ein tzarich. Ein tzarich means you will not need. You won't even have to rinse it. So let me ask Yitzchak, do you have a mic? Can I ask you a trick question? Yitzchak, you got a mic? My trick question, it looks like your mic is not working according to my signs here. Okay. So Dr. Dahan, let me ask you a question. Right now, according to the Shach, let's do this. The Basar and Gvina were both synonym, and were both Yavish. What's the din? Nothing, nada.
Correct.
Correct? Let me add one more spice to this. Basar Ugvina Sainin Yavesh, but Davar Charif. What do you think?
I guess that would be the issue because you mentioned earlier that this Davar Charif has the same, to a certain extent, component as would be cooking because it would transfer some of that. So, from what you said earlier, my understanding would be that it would not be that it's no longer kosher.
How far did the problem go?
I guess it went from rinsing now to where we would probably have to take off a piece.
But again, it starts off with a piece. You don't even have to do rinsing because it was Sainin and Yavish. Sainin and Yavish, the Shach says you don't have to do anything. So what happens if the Yavish is a Davar Charif?
Logically, personally, I would think that it wouldn't do anything because it's cold anyway. And I think that since it's cold, I don't understand how this Davar Charif would ever transfer any taste whatsoever because it's cold and it's dry. That's personally. From what you said earlier.
So you believe that pepper jack, let's say pepper jack cheese, let's say that would be considered Davar Charif. You think if and it's cold in the fridge and touches a raw chicken in the fridge, it wouldn't shoot out its taste whatsoever into the chicken?
I would think not.
Are you willing to bet on it?
No. But
okay,
I would think if it's dry, I don't understand how it would transfer. But from what you said earlier, is when there is something that's Davar Charif, it does transfer. I'm not sure.
Okay, does everybody have the Pischei Tshuva? Pischei Tshuva. Pischei Tshuva Aleph. Pischei Tshuva Aleph. Lehodiach. He quotes the word the Mechaber says you have to wash. He says, I am Be'er Heitev B'Shem Habach. Look into the Be'er Heitev in the name of the Bach. What is the name of the Bach? Is what we just learned. That if it's Yavesh, you don't even have to do Hadacha. Says the Pischei Tshuva, Umiyu Davar Charif. If it was sharp, Afilu Yavesh, even if it's dry. What's dry? Let's say the cheese, cold, dry, spicy. Let's go down the line. Gevina, Sainin, Yavesh, Charif. it is as bad as Tzayin Lach. In other words, Yavesh I put over here in green. Why did I put the Yavesh in green? Because Yavesh makes the problem even less. When food is Yavesh, it will not spit out its taste. Lach I made red. Lach is more moving the taste around. Davar Charif, even though it was even though it's Yavesh, if a Yavesh Davar Charif becomes red again, it becomes like Lach. And what would be the din Gevina Tzayin Lach? Would be the din Hadacha? So Gevina Tzayin Yavesh, if it's Davar Charif, would also need Davar Hadacha. It will move it up a notch, but not more than Hadacha, because even Dr. Dahan doesn't understand how the taste goes at all. But at least it will move it up one level. That we don't consider it anymore like Yavesh, we consider it Lach, and what would be the din by Lach if it's Tzayin? It's Hadacha. Okay? Uboi Hadacha. Fine. That's all I wanted to say there. Rabbi say, what I'm going to do now is only going to read the next couple of lines in the Mechaber, because everything I talked to you today was all outside, so I want you to have something tangible to read inside. And then, believe it or not, the next sif, the Mechaber Ramah, the Mechaber is very, very, very simple, and the Ramah is very, very, very complicated. So, we're going to spend a long time in the Ramah with a long shach. But we're still up to Hadacha. We're still up to Hadacha. Think the foods are cold, there's no taste being moved around, I have no problem. Says the Mechaber, but don't ignore this Hadacha. Don't ignore it. When I tell you that you have to wash the food, I mean business. Without washing the food, there might be a problem. There might be a problem without washing the food. That's how severe the chash, the worry about shamnunis will be. So much so, a Yid is never allowed to put himself in position that the only way he could eat the food is if he will wash it. For example, let me tell you by heart what he's saying. I'm traveling. Traveling won't be a perfect example because the Taz will soon say traveling is a case of di'evet. But let me make it. I'm traveling, and I'm in a rest area, and I'm pulling out my kosher sandwiches. I'm pulling out my food. It's cold, my sandwich. My vegetables. I'm a healthy guy. I only eat vegetables. My vegetables are cold. But I'm looking for a plate. I can't find a plate. The only plate I can find is from McDonald's or from the rest area, and it's clean. It's a cold, clean plate. Right? Should I be able to put my vegetables in that plate? Or, don't use it as a plate. I'm looking for something to temporarily store my vegetables, so I want to put it on a goyish pot, something that will hold my vegetables. Now, my vegetables are cold, the pot is cold, the plate is cold. So what's the din? The din, as we know, cold is no big deal, but you still need hadacha. Now, excuse me, I might sit down and start eating my vegetables without making hadacha. So, should you tell me that therefore I shouldn't do something? No, I am not allowed to use that bowl, that plate, because after using that bowl and plate, you have to wash it before you're going to eat the vegetables, and you might forget. Or the washing is no big deal. What does common sense say to Baruch Noam Dubrau? Baruch Noam? All right. So this is where Siv Beis comes. Says Siv Beis didn't quite get it. Can you repeat it? I will repeat it by reading the Siv inside. And he says like this. Kol midi de boy hadacha. Anytime. Anything. Kol midi means anything. The boy hadacha, which you have to wash. And only if you wash it, you could eat it. like the cases in Sif Aleph where it was tzainin and tzainin. Now here's the deal. You told me that I'm allowed to put in the same shopping bag chicken and meat, and you're allowed to put cheese in there too. If they're separately, they're not mamish touching. Why can't I make them touch lechatchila? Why can't I take a clean piece of cheese, throw it into my bag without a wrapping, and a chicken without a bag, throw it into my shopping bag? And you're going to tell me, they're going to touch. So big deal. They'll touch and I'll wash it. No. Remember, the Mishnah said, and the Mechaber and Sif Aleph said, Uvilvad shalayigu. You have to make sure they don't touch. You're not allowed to make him touch and then go wash it, because you might forget to wash. So therefore, the Mechaber says in Sif Beis, which is actually make yourself very, very common to this name. The Mechaber over here is quoting the Baal HaItur. The Baal HaItur is the source of this din. You'll see his name mentioned 100 times over and over now in this conversation. Kol midi de boy adocha, anything that has to be rinsed. For example, Lahaniach basar heter tzainen. Remember, three things. You want to put basar, you want to put your kosher meat, basar heter, your kosher meat, tzainen, which is cold. You have a cold piece of meat that you want to put somewhere, and you couldn't find a better place where to put it than bekaira shel iser tzainen. In the rest area, the only plate they gave you was a kaira, a plate that was iser, because 2 days ago or 2 hours ago they served pork on it. But right now the plate is tzainen, clean and tzainen. Should you be able to do it or not? Says the Mechaber in the name of the Baal HaItur, aser lechatchila. You're not allowed to do that. Why are you not allowed to do that? Because the only way you could go ahead and eat that steak is if you do hadacha. And we are afraid. We are afraid maybe you'll forget to do hadacha. Hadacha is serious business. Just like Clippa will be serious business, and Shishim will be serious business, on a much lower scale, hadacha is serious. You're never allowed to put yourself in the position that the only way you could eat this is if you do hadacha. B'dafka mevushel. This will only apply. Achel means to eat. Dilma achel, perhaps he will eat it. Perhaps he'll eat it without washing it. B'dafka, this rule that I just told you, that you cannot put yourself up and put yourself in this position, that you only can eat it if you wash, and you might forget. That will only apply by mevushel, by if the chicken that you're putting on the goyish plate was already cooked. Being that it was already cooked, who goes and washes a cooked piece of chicken before he eats it? So it's lav urche bahadacha. It's a food which is not common to wash, and therefore you don't have anything reminding you to wash it. So there's a good chance you're going to forget to wash it. And because there is that chance you're going to forget to wash it, you're setting yourself up for disaster. You're not going to do what you're expected to do. But midi, something, the urche ba'adacha, which is commonly washed, kagoin, for example, basar chai, raw meat. If you don't have where to put your raw meat, and the only plate you have to put your raw meat is on a goyish plate that's cold, that's clean and cold, I'm anyways going to wash my piece of meat before I cook it, so the washing is going to happen. Or anything like that, you're allowed to do it. Did everybody get that? Did everybody get the flow from Sif Aleph to Sif Beis? How Sif Aleph was giving you the headline that sometimes there's hadacha. And Sif Beis, he's telling you, don't ignore hadacha, don't make a joke of hadacha, because since hadacha is that serious, we will already tell you, you shouldn't put yourself in position that the only way you could do it is through hadacha. Now here's where I'm going to ask you a trick question, and it's not my question. Why in Sif Aleph it talks about basar gvina, right? Cold meat and cold cheese. And what's a shift to Sif Beis? Better, what's in Sif Beis what they're talking about? No more about basar gvina. In Sif Beis it shifts kosher meat in a non-kosher plate. Why doesn't he stay focused? Why doesn't he bring the same example? Who's talking about plates? Anybody have an answer? If you want to bring an example, yes.
Is he going to start talking about if you put cheese on a meat plate or meat on a cheese plate?
Forget it. Why even talk about plates? If you want to tell me that I cannot do something that has to or only come about through adacha, why can't I say you're not allowed to put chicken and cheese in the same bag without separate wrappings? Because when they touch, you're only going to be able to eat it if you do hadacha, and you might forget. Why can't you? Why did he start? He forgot about everything he said till now.
Because maybe plates is something that we rinse usually. The most common thing that we rinse is plates, and we speak about adacha. This is before the disposable things.
So what are you trying to say? Well, over here the plate is the isser, and you have the basar, which is the kosher. So what are you trying to say? Barrel. It's basar tzainin, basar heter tzainin that you're putting b'kaira shel isser tzainin. So what's he accomplishing by switching from basar gvina to basar and kaira shel isser? Huh? Yes. What do we have here?
Is it because just like you have kosher food, but it would be moist, like you said, it would be wet, and it has to be washed. But if it comes into contact with something which is forbidden, then it has to be also it has to be washed also, because it's coming into a vessel which is forbidden.
Give me an example. Give me an example. What happened?
We'll take a kosher piece of meat, and let's say, I have to think it through. Truthfully, this has to be washed. Let's take a kosher a food that's wet, and it has to be washed because it came into contact with something which is forbidden. That also has to be washed when it comes into contact with a vessel which is forbidden. It's just the logic. I'm not sure if it's true.
I have no problem with what you're saying, but why is he's not using the same example of Sif Aleph as he's using in Sif Beis? What's wrong to say his din? He could use the same example twice. That you're not allowed to put milk, cheese, and meat in the same bag if they're unwrapped, if they're touching each other. Why aren't you allowed to put them together if they're touching each other? Because the only way you could eat them now is if you wash them. And you might forget to wash them. Why did he shift from milk and from cheese and meat to meat and a kosher shalisser? Carol?
Maybe because before in Seif Aleph there is not real basar v'chalo, because there is nothing cooking there, so there is not a real prohibition. Now, when we speak about isur, if we eat a part of a isur, we really are eating a isur. So this now becomes something more danger. Now it's a real problem if you don't rinse and you are going to eat. Before, you are not really cooking basar v'chalav together. There is not a problem minatoide. Here with the isur, yes.
Okay, very good, Beryl, but I'll tell you the logic is, as we would say in Yiddish, pink kapidrich, just the other way around. Why is the logic verkehrt? Because over here, it's not the Isser. There's no more Isser here. There's no Isser here. It's a pot. All it is a pot that was by Leah Isser. When there's Isser, live Isser here, I will agree with you. When it's a pot that was by Leah Tam Isser, it's so far away from the problem. And what I'm saying, actually, my question and my answer is Taz Aleph. Taz Aleph discusses the Shaila. And he says, you know why the Mechaber switches, the Bala Itter switches from Basar and Gvina to Basar and Klisha Isser? Is to tell you that this Hadacha is such a serious business. Not only when the Basar and Gvina itself are here, but even when the Isser itself is not here anymore. Even where it's only in the Kaira, the bowl, the pot absorbed some taste. Even then, the Hadacha is a severe issue. And even that you're not allowed to do L'chatchila. That's why he shifts over. In the Sif Aleph, it's a definite that you shouldn't do. In Sif Beis, you might think, hey, I'll question it. And this is much easier. So he says, even though that the Kaira Shel Isser is a Kaira Shel Isser, it's not real Isser. And it's Seinen. You might think, who, big deal, just put it there. The answer is no. You have to have Hadacha. And that Hadacha is serious. It's so serious that if you don't do it, I won't allow you to eat it. Okay. Wow. The shear is, how long was this? How long is this? The shear went hour and a half. Right, time flies when you're having fun. Okay. Rabbi say, let's get our feet wet with this because it's just the beginning of Basi B'Cholov. Okay, Polto, David, stay on because you want. I said you wanted to talk to me about. You want to talk to me about something. Let me just shut off the recorder. I want to ask you.